Okay, so my name is Reilly Smith, and I work part-time here at Cornerstone. And today we're working on part 2 of a series that's titled, What is Keeping You from God? And as we go through this series, it's important to ask the question, what is it for you? I'm going to move this out of the way because I like to walk around. And what I mean by that is that you don't want to take all these things that we're talking about and think that you need to work on every single one of these. Scott listed 2 things last week that we needed to work on, and I'm going to list some things now today. And if you take all these, it's going to burden you, and it's going to be a lot. But instead, they're more things to reflect on, to think about, and to say, is this something I struggle with? And if it is something you struggle with, then work on it. But if it isn't, then don't let it burden you if it isn't something you struggle with. Having said that, there's a question I want you to think about today, in addition to the question up there. And it's a question that puts Jesus' life in a different light than what we're normally used to thinking of it in. And that question it comes from a human perspective, from a worldly perspective, one might say, is what was in it for Jesus? What was in it for Jesus to do what he did on this earth, to die on the cross? What was in it for Jesus? So I want you to keep that in mind today. And before I go any further, I'm going to pray. Father, I thank you for this day. I thank you for the youth that are going on this trip, Lord. And I ask that you would be with us here as we dive into your word, that you would help us to bring honor and glory to you by our thoughts and by what we do. In Jesus' name, amen. The temptation that I'm working on today, Scott did a previous one, and he did the first temptation, and that's the same in both Matthew and Luke. But I'm going to go to Luke today, and we're going to look at the second temptation in Luke, okay? And that's Luke chapter 4. In Matthew, it's the third temptation. And so I'm going to start reading there. But actually, before we go into Luke 4, we're going to start at Luke 3, verse 21. Because this is just a prelude to what's happening in chapter 4. So, chapter 3, verse 21 of Luke. Now, when all the people were baptized, Jesus was also baptized. And while he was praying, heaven was opened, and the Holy Spirit descended upon him in bodily form, like a dove, and a voice came out of heaven, "You are my beloved Son, in you I am well pleased." So before Jesus' temptations, we have him being baptized, and the Spirit descending on him. And Luke includes a genealogy here, but time-wise, we have this baptism, and then we have the start of chapter 4. So we'll go there now. And I'll flip through. There we go. Jesus, full of the Holy Spirit, left the Jordan and was led by the Spirit into the wilderness, where for 40 days he was tempted by the devil. He ate nothing during those days, and at the end of them he was hungry. The devil said to him, "If you are the Son of God, tell this stone to become bread." Jesus answered, "It is written, man shall not live on bread alone." The devil led him up to a high place and showed him in an instant all the kingdoms of the world. And he said to him, "I will give you all their authority and splendor. It has been given to me, and I can give it to anyone I want to. If you worship me, it'll all be yours." Jesus answered, "It is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only." The devil led him to Jerusalem and had him stand on the highest point of the temple. "If you are the Son of God," he said, "throw yourself down from here. For it is written, he will command his angels concerning you to guard you carefully. They will lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot against a stone." Jesus answered, "It is said, do not put the Lord your God to the test." When the devil had finished all this tempting, he left him until an opportune time. As I read through this, looking at specifically the second temptation, which is the first one on this slide. We kind of split it between the two slides here. It starts in verse 5. The question that I had is why does Satan pick this temptation? Why is this temptation the temptation that he picks for Jesus? Or at least it's the one that's shown to us. And there's a couple reasons, as I looked into it, for that. And one of the reasons why we probably see it, why it's included for us to see, is because how it corresponds to the Israelites and what they went through. And Scott talked about this last week. What the Israelites went through after coming out of Egypt corresponds very close to what Jesus goes through. Both had just come out of the water on a spiritual high. Jesus just been baptized, the Spirit descends, God speaks from heaven. The Israelites, meanwhile, had come out of the Red Sea. Moses had parted it for them, they had walked through it, and then it had crashed down, destroying all their enemies. I think we would all consider both of these things a pretty big spiritual high. Both were then led into the desert. 40 years the Israelites ended up being in the desert. Jesus ended up being in the desert 40 days. Both were very hungry. The Israelites were fed with manna from heaven. And Jesus hasn't been fed yet, but he's very hungry. And Israel, and then you see the 40 days and 40 years. But there's one more, other than that one, there's one more, and that's the story of the golden calf. And the golden calf corresponds very well to the temptation that Jesus is faced with here. Because the golden calf is the story of Moses goes up onto the mountain and leaves the Israelites for guess how many days? 40 days. And they are down there and they're wondering, they start to, at the end of this 40 days, think, Moses isn't going to come back to us. And the temptation for them is, I guess they see Moses as the figure who speaks to them from God. And without Moses there, they start to wonder, what are we going to do without him? And so we come to this point, and we'll start reading. It's Exodus 32, and we'll read what the Israelites did when they were worried about Moses not coming down. Now when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, the people assembled about Aaron and said to him, "Come, make us a god who will go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us up from the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him." Aaron said to them, "Tear off the gold rings which are in the ears of your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them to me." Then all the people tore off the gold rings which are in their ears and brought them to Aaron. He took this from their hand and fashioned it with a graving tool and made it into a molten calf, and they said, "This is your God, O Israel, who brought you up from the land of Egypt." Now when Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it, and Aaron made a proclamation and said, "Tomorrow shall be a feast to the Lord." So the next day they rose early and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings, and the people sat down to eat and to drink and rose up to play. So this was the Israelites' response to this issue that they had before them. They decided to make a golden calf. And we don't know, there seems to be a hint, if you look back here at the one point, Aaron still says, "Tomorrow shall be a feast to the Lord." So we're not sure how they view this golden calf, if they're just making, or if they're breaking the first commandment, that you shall worship the Lord your God only. We don't know, but we know that they're breaking the second commandment, that you shall not make any graven image. Okay? And it appears they're probably breaking the first commandment too, but they're definitely breaking the second commandment, that you shall not make a graven image. And then Moses finds out about this, and so we can keep reading. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, "Go down at once, for your people, whom you brought up from the land of Egypt, have corrupted themselves. They have quickly turned aside from the way which I commanded them. They have made for themselves a molten calf and have worshipped it and have sacrificed to it and said, 'This is your God, O Israel, who brought you up from the land of Egypt.'" Which is why I think that there's a good chance that they're breaking the first commandment too, that last verse. So, at this point, we have these people here who are impatient. It takes too long for Moses to come down, so they decide to take their own route, their own way of following God. And if you look in Exodus 20, that's where you have the commandments. They're definitely breaking the second one, which is, you shall not make for yourself an idol or any likeness of what is in heaven above or in the earth beneath or in the water under the earth. So we have this moment, this monumental moment when you think of it, where the Israelites have just had all these things that God has done for them. Okay, like he destroyed the whole armies of Egypt. And yet 40 days without Moses, and they start questioning all of it. And this corresponds so well to Jesus' temptation, being 40 days in the wilderness. And so we have this moment where Jesus is showing that he can fulfill all the things that Israel wasn't able to. That he can pass the temptations, the tests that Israel had, with flying colors. And this is what Matthew, for sure, and probably Luke as well, are trying to show us by including this test. But not only that, this test is like a grand, for Jesus, it's like a grand cosmic marshmallow test. And I don't know if you guys know what the marshmallow test is. We're going to watch a video on it, and you get an idea what the marshmallow test is.
Okay, sit in that chair. All right, here's the deal. Marshmallow for you. You can either wait, and I'll give you another one if you wait, or you can eat it now. When I come back, I'll give you another one, so then you'll have two. But stay in here and stay in the chair till I come back, okay? All right. So I'm going to leave and then I'll come back, okay? So you can either eat it right now or you can wait. Either way, okay? Okay. How'd you do? Did you do good? You did? You wanted to eat it, didn't you? Yeah. So did I tell you to give you another one? Okay, now you can have both. You need them.
So this is the marshmallow test. And the marshmallow test is actually a thing that was done at the University of Stanley. And they would take these kids and they'd do this test. And then they'd follow up later to see how they did with university and what level of job they got and how well it paid. And it was interesting that it corresponded directly that the kids who would take this, who would wait for the to get the second marshmallow, would, according to their parameters, be more successful in life because they were willing to wait to get double the prize instead of getting something right now, instead of instant gratification. And this is, in human terms, this makes a lot of sense. But if we go to Jesus' marshmallow test, you could say, it's the reward and the consequences are a lot bigger than 15 minutes. It's a larger scale. If we can put it in terms of the reward, there's the same reward in each instance if, and this is why I was asking you to think of it from a human perspective before, if you look at it from a human perspective and you say the reward is the power and authority you get. And that's what I came to the conclusion. If I look at this from a human perspective, what is the temptation for me as a human? And why Satan offers this, he's saying if you get all this power and authority, but Jesus, why would that be a temptation if Jesus is going to get that in the end anyways? Because we know he gets that. After it says that at the name of Jesus every knee will bow. Jesus is going to get all that. Jesus has all that. So why is this a temptation? Because the reward is exactly the same if you look at it from a human perspective. If you look at it from a selfish perspective of what's in it for Jesus. And so the cost on the one side is being ridiculed by nearly everyone in a nation, being betrayed by a close friend, condemned to death in humiliating fashion. You wear a crown of thorns that digs into your flesh, have nails pounded through your arms and legs. And then you have a workout where the reward is not suffocating. That's what hanging on a cross is. You're holding yourself up so you don't suffocate until you can't do it anymore. And then after all this, all your friends are going to get killed too, or most of them, for you. That's the reward, that's the consequence of the one side. That's the weight of it. And we're not even talking about the spiritual weight that happens at the cross. We don't know how to quantify that. But there's definitely a lot of spiritual weight at that time too. On the other side, all that he has to do, all that Satan asks of him is, if you worship before me, it shall be yours. And you get this idea, the way Satan phrases it, it's almost like, maybe if he just does a quick kneel and gets up again, then he's good. Is it worth it to just, quickly do that, avoid all the pain, and he gets the power and authority? How easy would it be to rationalize that in our terms? Last time I spoke, I took you back to Europe when we did a missions trip in Europe. And I'm going to take you back there again, but instead of Germany, it's going to be Switzerland. And we were in the mountains of Switzerland on our second or third last day there. And we were traveling from where we had stayed for the night to the oldest continuous running Anabaptist congregation in the world, they think. So it was a pretty sweet experience. We're on our drive there, and I'm following this driver. He's ahead of me in the next van. We have 2 9-passengers van, and the driver ahead of me is a Paraguayan who's moved to Switzerland. And so I'm going to tell you that Paraguayan driving, from what I hear from my wife's family, is nothing like Canadian driving. And I can tell you that the Swiss drive, not like Canada either. And so I have this combination Paraguayan-Swiss driver who's driving a lot different than what I'm used to, and we're in the mountains. And so we're taking a shortcut up and down and around the sides of these mountains. And we come over this one mountain, and I'm a little cautious by this point, so I'm going under 50. We come over this mountain, and there's a short straight distance, and then there's a sharp turn. And I'm not talking a 90-degree turn. I'm talking a turn that goes, and it goes 90 and keeps coming back around, almost like a 180 the whole way, because it curls back into the mountain. And so I'm like, well, I need to slow down for this. So I put my foot on the brakes, and as soon as I do that, for the first time that I can remember that day, the anti-lock brakes kick in. I'm starting to slide down, and I got a van full of 9 people, and we're sliding down towards this corner. And then I look, well, you start to evaluate, what do I got working on my side here? So I look at the railing, and the railing is what you would describe as a railway tie, laid on its side. It's 6 inches high, and that's what they got there to stop you, from going over the edge. And I'm not confident that this is going to stop me. And then at the last moment, I gain traction, and I go around the corner, and I don't think anybody else noticed in the van. And it's just all safe, just like that. It's a nice, happy ending story. But what if I had come back here? I came back here and reported after that. What if I had came back here, and I had told you that at that corner somebody had died? And that before I took the trip, that I had known someone was going to die, but I decided it was worth it so we could get there quicker. You would have been horrified. You would have thought that there is no way that that shortcut makes up for one life. There's no way. The life is worth far more than a shortcut is. And I think we have a challenge. I do this. I think we all do this, where we take the shortcut even though it puts a life in danger, and we know it's going to put a life in danger. And you're thinking right now, okay, I've maybe put a life in danger a couple times in my life, but those were mistakes, and I haven't done it since. But I think we do this on a weekly basis. We put our own souls in danger. I want to turn with you to Mark 8. And in Mark 8, we have this classic time where Peter gets rebuked by Jesus. And right after that, Jesus, verse 34, it says, "And he summoned the crowd with his disciples and said to them, 'If anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? For what will a man give in exchange for his soul? For whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will also be ashamed of him when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels.'" There's always a temptation, and this is the temptation that Satan presents to Jesus. There's always a temptation for even what we're going to get anyways, to take a shortcut to it. And, that can be from anything. It can be with our book work at the end of the year to say, you know what, this is just an easier route. It's going to clear things up, and it's going to be easier for me. Or even if it's in a relationship with someone we care about, and we think, you know what, it's better to just say a lie at this point because I'm going to keep the relationship close, even though I know if it involved forgiveness, confession, that would also keep us close, but it would be the longer, harder route. And sometimes we pick the easier route, or what we think is easier. And we have this idea that they're just tiny little sins, and that the weight of the opposite side is so much greater that it's worth it just for us to give this little lie or this little cheating the system to make it work. At the start of this, I had Journey Before Destination as part of my title. And that's part of the issue here for us, is that we look at the destination and we think the destination is the same so it justifies the journey. As long as the destination's the same, it doesn't matter the journey. But like I was showing in my example, the journey means a lot. How you're going to get to the destination means a lot. If you're sacrificing more than what the destination is worth, then why are you taking that journey? I got to give a disclaimer here because it's not about the hard way versus the easy way. It's about the right way versus the wrong way. Sometimes we get false guilt and we think that just because this is the easy way, I shouldn't take it. Well, that's not the case. It's about, is it right or is it wrong? Jesus, he looked at this, and it wasn't weighed on him. He didn't make the decision based on what was easier for him. That journey was about many people's lives, in his case. About all of our lives. And our choices often only involve our lives. But what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? In this life, we have the choice of picking the right way or the wrong way. And it often is based in the journey. Not always, but often. And if we look back to what Jesus did, it was a simple matter for him. When he responded, all he said was, "It is written, you shall worship the Lord your God and serve him only." That was the weight. That was how he weighed it. Is it right or is it wrong? Not easy or hardest, not on any other metric or scale. It was just, is it right or is it wrong? I think we're often tempted to take shortcuts, to take the easy way. Jesus held on for the greater prize that happened to be in the journey and not in the destination. Man, this is such a hard thing. I struggle with this all the time. To hold on, to not take the easy way, but to hold on for the greater prize. I encourage you to bow your heads in prayer with me.